Hi guys, welcome to my first ever book review. I'm so excited. So for my first ever book review on this new channel, I will be reviewing a book that I recently read and is a very popular one, Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Okay, so I read this book about a few weeks ago and I loved it. Okay, so to summarize, it is a fantasy slash romantasy novel and I rated this book 5 stars, even though it's not like a perfect book. I personally enjoyed it a lot and I had 5-star worth enjoyment. Okay, so the way this is gonna work, I'm gonna give you guys a summary and I'll give like spoiler-free reviews and opinions, and then I'll warn you when the spoiler is gonna happen, and then I will get into some spoiler opinions as well. Okay, I have some notes here so I don't mess up my first review. Okay, so Fourth Wing follows a girl named Violet Sorrengail who enrolls at Basquiat, which some people say is pronounced differently, but I don't know, feel free to correct me. So Basquiat War College to become a dragon rider for her kingdom. So something important about Violet is she is short and frail compared to all her peers, but she's still enrolled as a rider. This is despite wanting to be a scribe and having practiced for years to be a scribe, because her mother is a high-ranking general at this school and wanted her to follow the family legacy and be a writer. So as I mentioned, she is following her family legacy. She has to follow in the shadow of her very successful writer siblings, Mira and Brennan, which causes some mental struggles for her, and she has to live in their shadow. Along the way, she obviously makes friends, she meets bullies who want to kill her, and potential love interests. So that's a very, very vague summary of this book. Obviously a lot more happens, but that's in general what it's about. It's a very dragon-focused fantasy book with magic here and there, as opposed to other fantasy novels I've read like Aquatar, which is a very heavy emphasis on like fantastical beings and magical abilities and everything is magic. This is more like kind of fantasy. There's magic here and there, there's dragons, but like it's still like a regular college campus and people are like humans, you know, I think. Okay, as for my opinion and review. So again, this is all spoiler free. I loved this novel. I'm pretty new to fantasy reading, so I haven't read too many other books that I can compare it to, but this was such an easy read. I don't often care about books until a few chapters in, unfortunately, and I've said this so many times, but I hate starting new books for that reason. It's just hard to hook me in, you know? So this one was so well done. I was actually so invested from the first chapter. I tend to like more chill stories, like not too much action, not too much fighting, not too much war. This is very like, there's a lot of living in college and like, it's not as action focused as maybe some other books, which I personally really loved. And just from the start, I just loved the characters, I loved the setting, I loved the idea. It just puts you right into the fray, like first day of school kind of thing. It's just a really fantastic start. Along the same lines, the pacing is so well done. It is very consistent the whole way through. I don't think it had any like valleys or anything. It definitely had peaks, obviously, because important things happen and fun things happen, but there were no chapters where I was like, damn, this kind of sucks, can we get to the next chapter? Like, I just thought the whole thing was very consistent. Also, in my opinion, the writing is enjoyable. I know a lot of people, when I started reading this book, they were like, if you care anything about good literature, you're gonna hate this book. Okay, like that, it's just so dramatic. Like, it's so dramatic. It's not really that serious at all. The writing, maybe it's not like the highest quality literature I've ever read in my life, but like, it's definitely good. It's definitely fine. It doesn't distract really at all. As someone who reads books for enjoyment, I had little to no issues with the writing. I have read plenty of novels where it was really hard to get through because of the writing, and I haven't DNF'd a book yet, and I don't really like DNFing books. I like to finish them because I started them, but sometimes it is really weird and like really modern, like really just dated slang, whether it's like new or very old. I really hate stuff like that. This one is not like that. I think this one is just fine. I also loved the college setting. I thought it was really refreshing. I loved the student vibes. I thought it was a little more relatable, but even if not, it was just refreshing. Like, you weren't in a court, you weren't in like mystical fairyland. Like, it was just, you're like at the school. It's kind of like a castle in a kingdom or whatever, but like you're in a college. You're in like a war college. So I just really loved the setting, and I loved the vibes, and I loved the other characters and the students. It just felt very refreshing for a fantasy book. As for the characters, the FMC was not my favorite, but she also wasn't my least favorite, which is Feyre from Aquatar. I'm not a huge fan of overusing the trope of like weak girls who need to be saved by a guy, and like I think the trope works sometimes and it's fine, but like it's definitely a very overused trope. It's not you know, it wasn't really the situation in this book. Yes, Violet is very frail and weak and whatever. That's like her whole thing. But her other whole thing is that she made it out of a lot of situations despite that. And she didn't need a big strong man to help her, you know what I mean? Maybe people did help her on the side or like helped her without her asking or like whatever the case is. But it definitely wasn't like damsel in distress, whatever. Like she was very... Because of her previous knowledge with scribes, she is so knowledgeable. She gets through situations in very unique ways. She's very smart. I just think it's so cool the fact that while she is weak and frail, she was able to get through everything that her stronger and bigger peers got through. That being said, I loved her character growth through the novel. I really liked seeing her mindset changes. I liked seeing how she learned to work with things better. I thought that she had a really, really great arc in the whole book. Also, I did enjoy the MMC as well. I didn't feel like we got to know him that well though, which is kind of one of my complaints with this book that I'll touch on a little bit later. If we're gonna compare Xaden of this novel to the male main characters in other books like Tamlin or Rhys or Kingfisher and Quicksilver, I feel like I really like all those characters more because we like got closer with them. And Xaden, I just don't think that I know much about him. He still seems kind of like an outsider to me. That's maybe one of the complaints I had. I will say, even though I do think that, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I just think in comparison to the other novels that I've read, it's just, we had a weaker connection, me and the male main character of this book, basically. So without going into too many spoilers, I did really like the romantic story in this novel. I also did like the spice. There is spice in this book. However, it felt like the relationship grew the most in this one part of the book that they kind of showed like montage style, like a few time skips, a few like, oh, and this happened and then we moved on. Like, I feel like we really missed out on connecting with the two main characters and their relationship, which is kind of a bummer. I don't know if I've never seen anyone else complain about this, so it might just be a me thing, but I really do think it was a little bit fast paced. It's not totally believable, I would say. And it felt a little bit random. It's not that serious, but if I had to pick some complaints, there is one. I would also like to add, if you're not a fan of spice, I do really like the story in this book. I can't say for the other two, I haven't read the other two yet, but the spice is really obvious in this novel, and you can just skip the chapter, in my opinion. I think if you wanted to consume this novel, but you didn't want to read the spice, I think it's a very obvious chapter skip kind of thing. So there's definitely an option of that for you. There's not too much of it in here if that bothers you. Though I do think the spice scenes were pretty good. Also, a huge reason why I love this book is the dragons. Okay, this is the first book I've read that really has dragons in it. And I won't go into detail yet, but I loved the main dragons so much that it made me so mad that we don't have dragons in our mundane, boring world. And why was I forced to be a human? Why was I not forced to be a dragon rider and have my own dragons? That would be way better. I'm kind of bummed about it. Still not spoilers, but I loved the ending and the whole build up to the ending. I was on the edge of my seat and my jaw literally dropped at the last page. Like that. I was just like, I love it. The ending was so good. I love books that have good endings. Okay, now for some spoiler territory. So if you haven't read the book or you're avoiding spoilers, feel free to skip to this time where we're gonna give our final thoughts. If you are leaving, goodbye, see you then. Okay, now for the spoiler enjoyers. I loved Taryn and Andarna. I loved them. Oh my god. Andarna is so cute. I literally want my own pet dragon. She is so precious. Bro, when she said, oh, Andarna, use your claws. Oh my gosh, you don't even have claws. Use your paws. I was like, oh my god, she has paws. That's so cute. Obviously, Taryn is so badass. I love big dragons, and Taryn is just like so magical, so majestic, so powerful. I love that he takes care of Andarna. They are so perfect. I love them both. I'm obsessed. I want my own dragons. Also, I thought that Violet would end up with the weakest dragon, like Andarna, which would have been fine. I thought that, like, whatever. That's what I expected to happen. But I love that she ended up with Taryn, and obviously Taryn and Andarna. I thought that was way less predictable, and I think that's really cool. The weak girl got the really strong dragon. I love that. I don't know why. I didn't predict that. I thought she would end up with Andarna. I was like, of course, the weak girl with the weak dragon. Also, bro, the scene where they wanted to kill her in threshing, it pissed me off. I was so upset. I was, like, so, like, on the edge of my seat during that. On that note, okay. I did say the dragons were perfect. I did actually have one tiny complaint that ruined my immersion a little bit. The dragon voices were kind of weird. So specifically when Taryn says, as you humans say, for F's sake. I was like, do dragons really say that stuff? Like, it was a little bit unbelievable. They sounded like too human, in my opinion. I wish they sounded a little more dragon-like. I don't know, maybe less like human sentences. I don't know. I don't really know what it would be instead, but it felt a little bit weird, you know? That's probably my biggest complaint. It ruined my immersion here and there. It's not really world-breaking. Like, once you learn to forget it. Like, once I got over that, I didn't really care that much. My other complaint, which also isn't that big, I touched on earlier, it's just the relationship with Xaden. I feel like we didn't really get to know him or him and Violet's relationship, and then all of a sudden they're like obsessed with each other and all over each other. Maybe I missed something, maybe I zoned out during that part of the reading, but I felt like it was a bit off, and I wasn't as obsessed with Xaden as other girlies on the internet who read Fourth Wing. I don't know. Okay, welcome back, everyone. All in all, this is a really great romantasy book that isn't exclusively romance. I would say this is more of a fantasy book that has romance in it, as opposed to ACOTAR, which is more of like a romance story in a fantasy world. It's still a fine story, but this is definitely a lot more like non-romance plot oriented that just has plot sprinkled in. At least in this one. Again, I can't talk for the other two, but this one is definitely like that. That being said though, this is the first romantasy book where I almost skipped the spicy scenes because I was like so excited to get to the plot. I was like, oh my god, let's just move on from the spicy scene. Like, I just want to get back to the plot. The plot is so good. I'm just so interested in everything that I almost skipped the spicy scenes. And I didn't obviously skip them. They were quite good, to be honest, but I would never do that in one of the other books, but this one, I was just like, this is just, the book is so good that I want to just get back to the plot. Anyway, again, like I said before, it's not a perfect book, but I do give it 5 out of 5 stars because of how much I enjoyed it. And I absolutely think everyone else who's watching this should check it out as well. If you've read this book, or if you want to read this book, please feel free to leave your opinion in the comments. Be mindful of spoilers, though. And if you plan on reading this book, also tell me. Or if you didn't like this book, or if you don't plan on reading this book, also tell me why. I'm curious. Also, if you want to see me review another book, or talk about another book, please let me know in the comments. And I will see you guys then. Bye-bye.